right, I think we are ready. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sheriff John Rutherford, and once again, we're pleased to be hosting this annual Domestic Violence Awareness Month kickoff event. And I want to say thank you to all of our special guests who are here with us today. And I will read their names very quickly. Of course, we have Ellen Seiler, the Chief Executive Officer of Hubbard House. Thank you, Ellen. Lori Day, President of the Board for Hubbard House, as well as Edwina, a survivor. And also joining us from the city of Jacksonville, Michelle Barth. Michelle, good to see you. She's Deputy Chief of Staff to the Mayor, and Janetta Moore, Chief of Social Services Division, along with our criminal justice partners and Police Chief Patrick Dooley with the Jacksonville Beach Police Department, also Commander Tiffany Layson with the Atlantic Beach Police Department, Detective Scott Parker with the Neptune Beach Police Department, and Teresa Simak from the State Attorney's Office, and Jessica Morrison, the Victims Advocate for Baker County, is also here with us. So thank you all for being here. Also among the audience are Hubbard House board members and members of the Fatality Review Team that issues a report on domestic violence-related homicides each year. Also in attendance today from JSO are Undersheriff Dwayne Centerfit, Director of Patrol and Enforcement Carol Halacki, Director of Investigations and Homeland Security Tom Hackney, Director of Police Services Adam Brown, Chief of Investigations Mike Bruno, Chief of Support Services Greg Burton, who is also a Hubbard House board member, by the way, Chief of Patrol East Michelle Cook, and Chief of Patrol West Pat Ivey. We also have Assistant Chief of Crimes Against Persons Chris Butler and Assistant Chief of Crimes Against Property Evander Collier. Assistant Chief of Patrol Zone 2, John Lamb, Assistant Chief of Special Events, Leonard Proper, Police Lieutenant Elizabeth Kinney, and members of the Special Assault Unit, as well as other JSO members who are committed to this issue, and of course, our Victims Advocate, Kathy Pinnell. Where's Kathy? There she is. Good to see you, Kathy. Also, up here, we all stand together to show our solidarity in addressing the issue of domestic violence in our region, not just in Jacksonville, but across the entire Northeast Florida area. We know the importance of working together to make sure that we are a united front on this issue. And I can tell you we're out in front on all levels, enforcement, social services, and public education. Domestic violence continues to be a genuine issue in this country. Whether it is violence among intimate partners and those who are married to each other, or dating and relationship violence, or the domestic violence that children witness in the home, or are direct victims of that violence themselves. It happens in every community and in every neighborhood and among the families of people we all know. And I will tell you that when I became sheriff in 2003, I made it clear to my employees that JSO was adopting a zero tolerance for anyone convicted of a domestic violence related crime as a member of the JSO. There are some things that I simply will not tolerate, and domestic violence is one of them. The employees that work for the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, just like all the ones that are standing with me today, are men and women of integrity, honesty, and excellence. And they are committed to be role models in our community, especially for the children who may not be getting the right messages at home and don't witness good examples in their own family lives. So look, folks, I know domestic violence and family violence is an uncomfortable topic for the public to hear about, but it's a good thing every time a victim finds the courage to call the police and ask the police to intervene. The reality is many domestic calls that we receive don't meet the criteria as a criminal act. For example, there's civil matters that we get called out to, like a spouse tells her partner to move out after an argument, those sorts of things. We get a call because an individual is refusing to leave the property, in situations like that, but they all have the potential to escalate. That's why we need to respond to that scene. And I want our officers to answer each and every one of these calls and be prepared to respond and assist, even though it technically may not be a criminal incident. Intervention can stop escalation. So folks, to me, that's the message today. Intervention can stop escalation of the violence. So please call us if you are experiencing any of those things. As of last Monday, September 22nd, there have been 5,193 reported incidents of domestic violence in Duval County. This is down from last year, when at the same time we showed 5,653 reported incidents here today. Now, for these potential victims, the sooner we can get help and get them the necessary services the first time a domestic incident occurs, the more we can help prevent a domestic murder from occurring in the future. Now, here's the sad thing. The number of reported incidents are down, right? You just heard that, about 500. But from January 1st of 2013 to September 23rd of last year, there were 4 domestic violence calls during that year to date. 4 domestic violence murders in Duval County. In one of these cases, a suspect also committed suicide. However, even with the lower reports this year, as of Tuesday, September 23rd of this year, there have been 8 domestic violence murders here in Duval County. 2 of the cases were murder-suicide. And to break this down even further for you, 3 of these cases were a parent killing a child. In one, an adult son killed his father, and in the other 4 were adults killed by a partner. So here we have a situation where fewer people have reported domestic violence incidents to us, but we have doubled the number of folks that have been murdered in domestic violence incidents. So folks, as you can see, that's just unacceptable. And let me stress even further that in all of 2013, we only had 7, well, not only, we had 7 domestic violence murders. We've already exceeded that this year. That's a tragedy. That's a tragedy. And so to those victims of domestic violence out there, I want you to listen. If you're suffering domestic violence in your home, we have an excellent domestic violence prevention program known as INVEST. The Intimate Violence Enhanced Services Team, which is a collaborative response to domestic violence between JSO, Hubbard House, the State Attorney, and the city's Victim Services Unit. And as of October 1st of 2013 to September 16th of this year, the INVEST team had reviewed more than 8,000 reports for its 2013-14 fiscal year. Out of those, 545 reports were identified as potential victims, potential cases for INVEST, with only 51 victims accepting services. Ladies and gentlemen, domestic violence is not gender specific, it's not race specific, and it's certainly not limited to any one socioeconomic class. And it's important to recognize the 4 main types of abuse that are out there. Physical abuse, which is pretty obvious, slapping, hitting, punching, kicking, choking, all of those things. Emotional abuse, which can be name-calling, insults, verbal attacks, harming or threatening to harm a person, or their pets, playing mind games and those sorts of things. Sexual abuse, some of which is forcing themselves on unwanted sexual acts. And lastly, economic abuse. This includes not allowing someone to work, isolating them by limiting access to money, or other controlling financial decisions, or taking control of another person's paycheck. More information about these indicators that I just highlighted are available on the Hubbard House website at hubbardhouse.org. That's one word. And folks, this is actually going to be my last time hosting this news conference as Sheriff of Duval County. And I want to tell you that I'm very proud that we have all worked tirelessly and together to get the message out, and we are all doing our best with the resources that we have to prevent domestic violence and murder in our community. And in fact, this is the one type of murder that is probably the most preventable. It's the most preventable. If those folks who are victims of domestic violence would simply allow the police to intervene by calling and telling us what's going on, because you never know when it's going to ultimately result in a homicide, and the violence will continue. It is vital for us to raise awareness about domestic violence and about the help that is available at no charge, by the way. I'd also like to thank the members of the media who come out every year. Thank you guys for coming out and really helping us to get the word out during our October's Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office and the Hubbard House continue to have a strong partnership in working towards ending domestic violence, as do the other shelters and their law enforcement partners. And I want to thank all of the agencies of Northeast Florida who do partner with us in trying to drive this crime out of our community. So God bless you all, and thank you. And now we have a Domestic Violence Awareness Month proclamation, and I'd like to invite Janetta Moore to the podium, Chief of Social Services for the City of Jacksonville. Janetta.
Good morning. On behalf of Mayor Alvin Brown, I will read the proclamation. Whereas domestic violence is a crime that endangers women, children, and men, and in 1987, the first Domestic Violence Awareness Month was observed nationally. And whereas every year it is estimated that 25,000 local women, children, and men crossing all economic, racial, and social lines are victims of domestic violence. And more than 3 million children witness domestic violence in their homes annually. And whereas the crime of domestic violence destroys an individual's privacy, dignity, security, and humanity. And according to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, domestic violence is the third leading cause of homelessness among families. And whereas the destructive impact of domestic violence is wide-ranging, affecting families, corporations, criminal justice systems, medical communities, and societies as a whole. And domestic violence costs more than $37 billion a year in law enforcement involvement, legal work, medical and mental health treatment, and lost productivity. And whereas it is vital for our community to support victims of domestic violence and their children who suffer grave financial, physical, and psychological losses, to impose legal sanctions on the perpetrators of domestic violence and to help perpetrators overcome their abusive behavior. And whereas Hubbard House Incorporated is an award-winning nonprofit organization dedicated to eradicating domestic violence in our city since 1976, providing services to 4,500 victims of domestic violence and their children, as well as intervention services to 600 offenders. Now therefore, Mayor Alvin Brown, by virtue of his authority as mayor of Jacksonville, do hereby proclaim October 2014 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in Jacksonville, and call upon all citizens to join him in recognizing the vital role Hubbard House plays in our community, and to work to eliminate personal and institutional violence against women, children, and men, thus helping make every relationship violence-free. In witness thereof, the first day of October in the year 2014, signed by Mayor Alvin Brown. And I'll present this to and the sheriff.
Alrighty, and next we have Teresa Simak from the Assistant State Attorney's Office. Come on up.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Teresa Simak. I'm the Division Chief of the Special Assault Division in the State Attorney's Office. And it has been my honor for the last 4 years to serve as the chairperson of the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Team. Each year, the team begins to meet in January, and we review each and every domestic violence homicide that has occurred in the city of Jacksonville in the last calendar year. In 2013, we reviewed 7 cases of domestic violence homicide. We make recommendations based on our reviews, and we note certain things that are a consistent pattern. Domestic violence is still highly genderized. It is still mostly, by 86%, a crime against women. 86% of the suspects last year that killed their partners were men. In the one case where a female killed her male partner, that homicide was ruled justified because there was a long history of domestic violence between the two of them, and he had been abusing her. One of the things that we noted this year was the importance of the relationship status of the people involved in domestic violence fatalities. 66% of the couples involved in the homicides last year were separated at the time of the homicide. So what that means is that leaving a relationship or attempting to leave a relationship may increase the lethality of that relationship instead of decrease. So all of the partners that work together to work with domestic violence victims need to be aware of that. Third, there's a very strong correlation between domestic violence and substance abuse and mental health issues. In the 7 cases that we reviewed, 1 of the suspects had documented substance abuse issues. 1 had documented mental health issues. And 2 of those suspects had documented histories of both mental health issues and substance abuse. Counseling needs to address all 3 of these issues. And we need to be aware that substance abuse and mental health aren't necessarily precursors for domestic violence, but they are strongly correlated with that. The 4th thing that we discussed were injunctions. There is a civil process in which someone can get an injunction to keep someone else who's hurting them or abusing them from coming near them. Out of the 7 cases, only 1 victim had an injunction against that suspect. And we were a little surprised by that. One of our recommendations to the judiciary is that if an injunction is going to be ordered, batterer's intervention should be ordered as part of the injunction process. To get an injunction, you have to prove that there is a history of violence or a threat of violence. So it only makes sense that if you're getting an injunction, the person the injunction is against should have to do batterer's intervention. From 1997 to 2013, 25% of the suspects had prior arrests for domestic violence. Out of that 44, only 19, which is less than half of those people, were ordered into a certified batterer's intervention program. Sadly, only 2 of those people during that 16-year period completed batterer's intervention. That is unacceptable. The success rate for completed batterer's intervention is 88% over a 3-year follow-up period. That means that people who complete batterer's intervention do not reoffend in domestic violence arrests for the 3-year period that we track. Completing batterer's intervention makes a difference. In 2013, only 1 suspect had a prior arrest for domestic violence. So in the other 86% of the cases, there was no contact with a system. There was no opportunity for us to intervene. None of those incidents were reported. And we know that intervention helps. So this is our recommendation. If you are in an abusive relationship, if you are being hit, slapped, punched, kicked, spit on, strangled, or threatened, call us. We can help you. You need to call 911. You can call a women's shelter. You can call the state attorney's office, because our intervention can save your life. And love shouldn't hurt. Thank you.
Okay, we'll now hear about raising awareness for domestic violence from Ms. Ellen Seiler.
I hope all of you know how lucky we are here in Jacksonville to have the law enforcement support we have on this issue. They are wonderful. I've served on that fatality review team since 1998, and it always saddens me how many of the victims have never called the police, have never called Hubbard House, where we had absolutely no opportunity to intervene. It's just, as you've already heard, this is a very preventable homicide if we can get that intervention and that chance. October is the month when we're trying to raise awareness of domestic violence through different events and activities like this press conference. For Hubbard House, we'll have the Barbara Ann Campbell Memorial Breakfast on October 15th, where we will have 2 survivors tell their stories to help raise that awareness. In the last few weeks, we all got a glimpse of the brutality of domestic violence and the callousness with which a victim can be treated. But that was just a glimpse. That was one punch. I hear from victims all the time that they are repeatedly punched, that they are kicked when they're down, kicked even once they're unconscious, and I hear of beatings that last 20, 30, 40 minutes. So keep in mind that that glimpse is just that. It's a glimpse, a rare glimpse that it's very seldom we get to see. Victims need our help. Victims need not to be blamed for being the victim of a violent crime. They need our support. Abusers need to be held accountable for the violence by all of us, including the system, and they need to be held accountable to the full extent of the law. If you're a victim of domestic violence, if you're in danger at this point in time or at any point in time, please call 911 so we get a chance to help. If you need someone to talk to, if you're not sure what to do, if you're not sure what you want to do, or if you need a safe place to be, call the state hotline at 1-800-500-1119. If you're calling from Duval or Baker counties, that call is going to be routed to Hubbard House. If you're calling from Clay County, it'll go to Quigley House. If you're calling from Nassau County, it'll go to Micah's Place. And if you're calling from St. Johns County, it'll go to Better Griffin House. All of us stand ready to help you. So please call. And let's keep the dialogue going about domestic violence. We've had a lot of dialogue lately. I don't want it to just fade away. Join our social media campaign, #WhyIStandUp, and share your reasons for taking a stand against domestic violence. I stand up for those women whose voices have been silenced. Since we were talking about fatalities in the Fatality Review report today, I asked Edwina Robinson to come here and say a few words to us. Her daughter was murdered by her abuser. I don't want any of you out there to face the tragedy and the trauma of being a homicide survivor. Hopefully her words will inspire someone to come forward and seek help. Edwina?
Good morning. If you would, please just say with me, you are a survivor. I'd like to share this information with you today, and it will confirm the reports that have already been said. But on October 9th, 2005, my daughter, Felicia Jenkins, was the victim of domestic violence homicide. Her husband of 12 years murdered her, and then he committed suicide. Felicia was 31 years old, the mother of 4 children, 3 girls and 1 boy. At the time of her murder, her children were 12, 11, 10, and 4 years old. Felicia had been an employee for 8 years with the state of Florida. She worked in the child support division. We had celebrated her obtaining her AA degree from FSCJ June of 2005. I haven't done that yet. She hoped to pursue a career in nursing, in pediatrics. She loved children. She loved her children. Needless to say, her family was extremely proud of her accomplishments. The impact of losing my daughter has been far-reaching, and it did not end with the 2 gunshot wounds Felicia took to the head. Having to deal with a legal system that I knew nothing about and relying on people to make life decisions for my daughter's children was an emotional drain. Guardianships, custody evaluations, visitation, counseling sessions, all of that were like foreign languages. Domestic violence took my daughter away, but today she speaks through me, and I would like to share the following from a letter she had written. And in her own words, I quote, "There is nothing at this point that could change my decision on why I should stay in something I'm not happy with. This unhappiness did not start recently, but the day I said I do. Many things I keep to myself of the struggles I've endured, and I know you all will never know the depth of the pain and anguish he's put me through. I'm to the point where I can no longer pretend that everything is okay. I can no longer smile when physically I'm dying as a person inside," end quote. She wrote those words on September 24th, 9 days before she was murdered by her husband. In light of what's going on in our world today in 2014 with the NFL, as it's already been mentioned, and our recent murders in Belle, Florida, for victims of domestic violence, it's vital and life-saving to be aware of the help that is available. My daughter attempted to handle her lethal situation on her own and with a few of her co-workers that devised their own safety plan. But connecting with professionals in this field is the only way to survive, just as it's been shared. My heartfelt thanks to you, Sheriff Rutherford, all of your police officers, my Hubbard House family, my co-workers, the volunteers that work with domestic violence, because you are on the front line. You're letting victims know of the resources that are available for them in order to safely escape and survive the situation. And in closing, as a community, I'd just like to say we must continue to take a stand against domestic violence. Domestic violence does not discriminate. Young or old, black or white, rich or poor, it matters not. We must let perpetrators of any act of violence know that for any intentional or willful violation of our personal freedoms, it will not be taken lightly. We must stop the violence, because I can attest to the fact that domestic violence kills. Thank you for allowing me to be my daughter's voice today.